and Philadelphia has it.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Phaithful Fanatic show here on DSM Media. I'm joined today by my co-founder here at DSM, Scotty. Check him out on Twitter at Scotty Drown. And of course, a really good friend of the show and fellow Eagle fan, ESPN's own Paul Hembekides. As we get you ready for this Eagles-Giants divisional round matchup, make sure you guys check him out on Twitter if you don't already, at Paul Hembo. Give him a follow. My man, it's good to have you back on the show. I'm sure you're ready for 8:15 Saturday night like the rest of us. But I got to admit, I saw the profile picture on Twitter. So my first question, how is the Hembekides household holding up this week?
Yeah, not well. So for those unfamiliar with of which you speak, I was born in Baltimore, but I grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So I've been a fan of all things Philadelphia since I was something like 10, going back to probably like 2000, you might say. My wife is a lifelong fan of the New York Giants. With season tickets in a family dating back to the 1960s. Like we're talking about like the Yale Bowl Giants. And so the rivalry runs deep. So that was the picture of which you speak is on our wedding day. I wore a Eagles jersey. She wore a Giants jersey. We took a couple of pictures in it to be cute. At that point, I never would imagine the Giants might be good enough to ever make the playoffs again. But here we are. We find ourselves in quite the predicament. So she and I mean, there are going to have to be stakes. There are going to have to be wagers. And obviously, since that picture was taken, we have since had two kids on the same day in August. And so my daughters, Charlotte and Michelle, have TBD fandom that still needs to be decided. So there's an awful lot riding on what happens on Saturday night. And while I'm confident in how good the Eagles are, I can't say that I have no skin in the game because quite a lot is at stake in the Hembekides household.
You guys might have to put some plexiglass between the two of you because words and some other little bashing might be going on.
No doubt.
But anyway, man, I'll get this question out of the way. It's honestly, I hate asking it. Scotty and I feel the same way. I'm sure I know where you lean. But for some reason, it feels like maybe not Eagles fans in general, but on social media, whether it's reporters, fan base, other fan bases, have changed their minds. The narrative has shifted in what this matchup is. Is this still the best possible outcome, the Eagles versus the Giants, rather than what would have been the winner of the Dallas-Tampa game on Monday night, in your opinion? Like, was this the most favorable outcome for the Eagles?
Yes, the Giants are the worst team remaining in the playoffs on either side of the bracket, in my judgment. The Giants were outscored on the season. The Giants don't have an above-average offense or defense on balance. Now, they have played better lately. They have a legitimately great coach. They have a much-improved quarterback. They have a back in Saquon Barkley who on any given day can get you 200 yards from scrimmage. Like, they obviously have many of the ingredients. They're not in the divisional round of the playoffs by accident. I mean, this is the Elite Eight, and they're in it. But in terms of what the Eagles drew here, with Jalen Hurts' shoulder being something of a question mark, with the Eagles having sort of limped to the finish line with, I think, a sort of underwhelming performance against New Orleans, and obviously Week 18 was nothing to write home about. This is as soft a landing as you could expect. But this is the playoffs, and so I don't ever go into a playoff game feeling exceedingly confident. Like, it's one thing to go into a playoff game the way that we do here as a touchdown favorite and feel like your chances are awfully good. But the Giants are in the playoffs for a reason, not by accident. Would it stun me if the Giants won? No, of course not. It's the playoffs. And the Eagles have a few things that I'm worried about, in all candor. But the Eagles are a much better football team, and if they play this game 10 times, I think the Eagles would probably win 8. And that's what I think is likeliest to happen on Saturday.
I think it's a good way to put it. Just taking that a little bit further, a little bit of what the Giants have been doing a lot better, right? We've seen Kayvon Thibodeau get into the quarterback regularly. That pass rush is getting better as the season has gone on, it feels. One way they can possibly muck this game up with an Eagles team that is more talented, right? Blitzing packages, going after Jalen Hurts, right, with the injured shoulder that everybody's been talking about. If you're Sirianni, how do you approach this game? Pass early, run early? What would you do when you're looking at this Giants defensive front?
So my expectation is that the Giants will blitz a lot, and especially early. I think Wink Martindale knows what he loves and loves what he knows. They blitz more than any team in the NFL, and even though they didn't blitz all that much last week, the fact of the matter is the Minnesota offensive line isn't nearly as good as the Eagles. And so in order to generate pressure on Jalen Hurts, the Giants are going to have to bring more than 4. Kayvon Thibodeau has improved quite a bit throughout the season. In my judgment, Dexter Lawrence is the single biggest problem on that defense. He's one of the 10 best defensive players in the NFL this season. He single-handedly wrecked that game last week against Kirk Cousins. I think it was 6 pressures in that game from nose tackle, which is frankly unheard of. My expectation is that you see Wink send blitzers early, in part because that's just what he does, but also because I think he wants to check Jalen Hurts' oil. I think they want to take a couple shots at the guy, and if they happen to draw a roughing the passer flag early on, I think they can live with it. That's what I think we are likely to see. In reverse, I think we are likely to see the Eagles probably shy away from a lot of the zone read design stuff early just to see if they need it. My expectation is that they will have access to 100% of the playbook, but Jalen Hurts isn't 100%. And so limiting early hits in that game, I think, would probably serve the Eagles well. And I'm not sure they have to empty the kitchen sink against a Giants team that, again, is inferior talent-wise, doesn't have a defense nearly as good as our offensive line can block. And given the fact that Jalen Hurts has played one meaningful game in the last month, and we know isn't 100% or maybe even that close. So I think we are likely to see a lot of tempo throws and a lot of balls in the belly of Miles Sanders. And that, I think, is probably the way to go early in this game. And if you have to empty the bucket and run Jalen like crazy and do all sorts of downfield stuff, then you will. But I wouldn't necessarily do all that stuff early. Maybe you want to show that you have it in your bag, but I want to limit the hits as best I possibly can, given the fact that the objective here is to win 3 games and not 1.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm going to skip ahead of the question because I think we're all in agreement, and what Hembo just read out, Scotty, is the fact that they might not have to put Jalen in harmful situations with the read options and with the RPO. So I guess my next question to you, and basically what Scotty was alluding to, what do you do early on? Do you try to open things up in the pass by establishing the run, or do you try to air them out from the opening jump? Is there any concern you have on either play calling side that would allow the Giants to stay within this game? And what do I mean? Go back to Jalen's injury, Chicago. The forcing of trying to move the ball down the field when it's not there against the 28th ranked run defense. Is there any concern between Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni's ability to play call at this level in the playoffs where they'll try to force the ball down the field early on?
Yes and no. The reason the answer is yes is because we saw last year in the playoffs them do an awful job against Tampa in panicking early and sort of opening the floodgates for Tampa to be able to pin their ears back. But this is, of course, a very different Eagles team and a much different quarterback. The reason I'm not that worried about it is because the Eagles have had effectively a month to prepare for this game. I mean, the Giants were a very likely draw. They didn't show them anything in week 18. And so I think what you'll see is a very clean, precise start to the game because this is such an organized coaching staff with a very coherent philosophy that they know, oh, we can be great at this. I am a little bit worried about the Chicago game stuff kind of seeping in where Jalen Hurts starts to get a little bit greedy, wants to take those shots sort of unnecessarily. And don't make no mistake about it. Like, the downfield passing game is a major attribute of this offense. And Jalen threw 22 touchdowns this year. The average of those touchdown passes traveled 31 yards in the air. All right, this is a downfield passing game. It's an enormous part of what they do. But that being said, when you have a quarterback with an injured shoulder, and you don't have a month of equity having played meaningful games over the last month together, what you don't want to do is force stuff without getting the simple stuff right. Like the Eagles are going to have to major in what's easy for them, and handing the ball in the back in the belly of the back to me is going to work. I think Miles Sanders can average 5 yards a clip in this game. And the other attribute of this game that I think needs to be said from the jump is I think this is the Dallas Goedert game because the Giants rank in the bottom quarter of the league in defending the tight end, both by yards per attempt and by completion percentage. T.J. Hawkinson went wild last week against them, as he did in Week 16, as Mark Andrews did in Week 6. Why is that the case? Well, of course, because they man blitz and because the tight end is the first option for a quarterback if you want to get the ball out of your hands in 2.5 seconds. And so if Jalen Hurts is looking to make quick decisions, he's going to put those Giants linebackers and safeties in a bind. I think you're going to see Dallas Goedert go nuts on short developing routes early in this game. And the combination of that plus Miles Sanders, I think will likely open up stuff on the outside. I think you can go in to out in this game rather than out to in, as the Eagles have very successfully done throughout much of the season.
No, very well said. And just staying on kind of the running back subject, I know you brought Miles up there. Boston Scott always sends to get in the end zone against this Giants team. I'm just curious, and it's kind of a funny question. Do you think he can make it 3 for 3 on the season against the Giants, getting into the end zone? The only reason I ask, I know it feels as if Nick Sirianni is very narrative driven when he is allowed to be. When he's allowed to be, that's the key there. If it's a close game, do I think he forces Boston Scott down their throats? I don't think so, but just curious your thoughts there. And maybe why does Boston Scott always kill the Giants?
That's just a statistical anomaly more than anything else. He has scored 17 touchdowns in his career, and 10 of them have come against the Giants. It's absurd. I've never seen any split like that in my entire life. But to answer your question seriously, I don't think Nick Sirianni necessarily has Boston Scott in his DraftKings lineup this week. But I do think, what I do think is that in the interest of Jalen Hurts and not to overexert him in the run game, you will probably see more Boston Scott and Miles Sanders just sort of work in naturally as a way to reduce those Jalen Hurts hits and Jalen Hurts carries. And the Eagles, I think, are very likely to be driving the football with some effectiveness against this defense. So you're going to get 3 or 4 red zone drives in all likelihood. So, look, I mean, I suppose like it's definitely on the list of options. The other point worth making here is that Boston Scott can run the zone read with you really effectively, as Miles Sanders can, of course. And that was what the Eagles majored in Week 14 when they absolutely manhandled the Giants. In that game, these numbers are crazy. In Week 14 against the Giants, the Eagles ran zone read 19 times in that game for $171 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, the Eagles ran wild. And look, I mean, these guys play man, right? These guys are very. The Giants are very specific, very particular at what they do, and they don't deviate much. Like they're not multiple. And so if the Eagles find that they can win on zone read, even if it requires Jalen Hurts to take a couple shots, I think you see Miles Sanders and Boston Scott have huge days. And if that means Boston Scott gets in the end zone again and continues to pad that narrative, then more power to him.
Fair enough.
It's funny. I think Giants fans have forgotten the 48-22 shellacking that they received a couple weeks ago because all you hear is you barely beat our backups last week.
I'll just say it. Giants fans are right now getting high off of their own farts because I live with one. And the notion that we should be worried about what happened in Week 18 is steadfastly ridiculous.
It's so bad.
That was a walkthrough. It was a scrimmage. It was just a measure of ensuring we got the number 1 seed and let Jalen Hurts play football. The Eagles ran the most vanilla offense you've ever seen. Do you know how I know for sure that game won't matter? Because I watched what the Dallas Cowboys just did at Tampa after the Dallas Cowboys played the worst game I've ever seen against Sam Howell, Ron Rivera, and a benched Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke in Week 18. The Eagles did the same thing. You're not giving anything away. They knew they might play the Giants 2 weeks later. So if you're a Giants fan that is going to use that game as data for why the Eagles might lose the game, then, I mean, if the Eagles lose the game, it won't be because of that or have anything to do with that. I'm not one that likes to live in the narratives. I like to live in what happened, not what didn't happen. What didn't happen was that game mattering.
Right. We've talked a lot about the offense and Jalen Hurts so far, and I'm sure we'll circle around back to it by the end of this show, but I want to go over to the defensive side of things. Avonte Maddox, as of like an hour ago, maybe a little less, officially listed as out this week in the division.
Huge deal. I'm cutting you off. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And I have numbers to back that up. I think the middle of the field in the passing game becomes the Eagles' biggest vulnerability if Avonte Maddox is not in.
Okay.
Here are the numbers. So with Maddox on the field, the Eagles allow, and this is about an even sample size. This is not cherry picking here. I'm awfully good at that, but in this case, I'm not cherry picking. With Avonte Maddox on the field, the Eagles defense allows 5.5 yards per attempt between the numbers. So in other words, when Avonte Maddox is playing slot corner for the Eagles, they are the best pass defense in the NFL in covering the middle of the field. Full stop. But when he's not on the field, when Avonte Maddox is not in the game, the Eagles allow 8.3. It's a 3-yard difference. That number, just for context, is the exact same figure that Minnesota averaged throughout the regular season. They ranked 30th in the NFL. So what I'm telling you is the differential between Avonte Maddox being on the field and not being on the field is equivalent to the difference between the Eagles being the best and the 3rd worst in the NFL at something. Now, there's obviously a lot of statistical noise to that. I'm not suggesting they have no chance to cover Isaiah Hodgins in the slot or some such nonsense. What I am saying is that if the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl this year, which of course is the objective for all of us, including them, I have a hard time seeing it happen if Avonte Maddox is a non-factor because he has proven to be one of the 5 best slot corners in the NFL, and we have an entire year of data with an equivalent sample size on both sides that say he is enormously important to what they do in the middle of the field in coverage.
Potential patchwork. would you consider moving CJ Gardner-Johnson down to the slot and starting Reed Blankenship at safety rather than CJ Gardner-Johnson at safety while Josiah Scott fills in the slot?
I don't know. I mean,
do you have to pigeonhole him as well as another question there?
Right.
Like, does he have to just play one or the other?
Yeah.
Or can you move him around?
This feels like a Vince Papale game on defense to me if he can't play. To answer your question honestly, I would continue playing CJ at safety and sort of stick with what he's great at, because I don't think the Giants can win in the middle of the field as easily as, say, the average team.
Okay.
Brian Daboll's smart enough to exploit this area of the Eagles defense. I most definitely wouldn't try this against San Francisco, but in a game against the Giants, I don't want to upset the apple cart too much and create potential 2 issues for myself. I like to roll the dice and hope that Avonte Maddox might be available next week. And CJ Gardner-Johnson was so incredibly good playing safety this year for the Eagles and so incredibly opportunistic that I want to fix something that's not broken or potentially break something twice. Now, that's not a very scientific answer. It's just sort of my gut. But I think the Eagles can play passable middle of the field defense against the Giants without Avonte Maddox. I do not think they can do that against Kyle Shanahan.
Fair enough. So just kind of staying on that point, and you look at the defensive side of the ball. So with Jonathan Gannon, there's been a lot of speculation, especially from the Eagles fans. It's kind of a bittersweet relationship we have with Jonathan Gannon. Are there any concerns with the way he throws the zone out there? I mean, just the way he uses the defense in the zone tendencies. Is there any concerns with how that's going to play out on Saturday night? Do you have any concerns that the Giants can exploit that?
No, at least not on Saturday. My concern with Jonathan Gannon's philosophy could definitely manifest next round and would definitely manifest in the Super Bowl against a superior quarterback. Like, we've seen great quarterbacks shred Jonathan Gannon's defense over the last couple seasons. But I don't expect it to be as big an issue against the Giants, because do you know what is Jonathan Gannon proof? The Eagles pass rush, because they have dudes that can win, and it doesn't matter what he dials up. The numbers are absurd. The Eagles this year had 70 sacks. Now, that number without context already speaks for itself, but we can add the context. The team with the second most sacks this year was the Chiefs. They had 55. In other words, the Eagles had 15 more sacks than any team in the sport. The last time that had happened was more than 60 years ago. What makes that even more impressive, frankly absurd, is that of those 70 sacks, 54 of them came when rushing 4. The Eagles had 54 sacks this season when not blitzing. That is far and away the most such sacks in a season since ESPN began tracking that stat. And in Week 14 against the Giants, the only game we played against them that mattered. It was 7 sacks, 16 pressures, and a pass rush win rate of 73%. It was Georgia TCU. So my expectation is that Jonathan Gannon's defense might well catch up with us, but it ain't going to be on Saturday night, and it ain't going to be against the Giants.
I agree with you, man. Sticking defensively before we start to wrap this up and get into predictions and all, what to you would be a bigger key? Eliminating Saquon or containing Daniel Jones in the pocket?
B. Saquon Barkley isn't going to beat the Eagles going 5.5 yards at a time.
Right.
Daniel Jones picks up first downs at the highest rate in the NFL when running it, and has proven to be a very passable passer throughout the second half of the season. Obviously, that manifested last week as well, despite having really no receivers. I found myself watching that game last week.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't think he had any receivers. Like, the Bills cut Isaiah Hodgins on November 1st. He had 100 yards in the game. And the Daniel Jones to Darius Slayton connection is actually one of the sneaky good ones in the league. So I'm not nearly as worried about Saquon Barkley beating you within structure as I am Daniel Jones beating you outside of it. What makes Daniel Jones so maddening to defend is that you can do everything right on defense, and he can just tuck his tail between his legs, scramble out for 12 yards, do some sort of weird, awkward slide right past the sticks, and then you have to keep huffing and puffing. We just asked the Vikings defense. I mean, that was a tour de force. He had 22 of their 28 first downs last week. I mean, Daniel Jones was a dude last week, and Eagles shouldn't overlook that aspect of his game. He's not sneaky athletic. He's just athletic. Just because he went to Duke and he looks like me doesn't mean he has to be sneaky. Daniel Jones is a world-class athlete. I'll say it with my chest. So he's
a big guy too.
Yeah, he should definitely have a JanSport ad. I don't know why that hasn't happened yet either. But I mean, Saquon Barkley would have to have 200 yards in this game for me to be worried about that.
Okay.
Daniel Jones, to me, could scramble 3 times for first downs and could sort of single-handedly wreck things out of structure.
I only asked that question because the times you've seen the Eagles come away with a loss this year or find themselves in trouble is when time of possession is against them. And I was just thinking if Saquon, you mentioned 5.5 as the number, if they were able to keep the Eagles offense off the field. But I do agree with you. I do think containing Daniel Jones is probably a little bit more important.
It's probably like one of those things where if you let Daniel Jones, if you lose containment on Daniel Jones, then you'll probably lose containment on Saquon as well. Like they're probably running the ball really well.
They do the same stuff. It's not that different than Jalen and our backs.
Right.
I think the preparation for those things is happening in the same meeting. It's happening between the same people. I'm not as concerned about time of possession as you are. I'm more worried about turnovers. If the Eagles are going to lose this game, it's going to be because weird things happen like did against Washington on that Monday night. If the Eagles lose the time of possession 33-27, to me, that's effectively immaterial.
I mean, I'm going to come out and Scotty and I are going to give our predictions Saturday morning, but I'm going to tell you, if there is a chance, I think time of possession is a factor. There's no possible outcome where the Eagles lose this game. I'll tell you right now. I don't care. Stamp it. You can clip this when they lose. I don't care. They're not losing this game.
So I'll make my pick and address that comment.
Yeah.
This is the playoffs, and so I don't feel that way about almost any regular season game, and I definitely don't feel that way about the playoffs. If the Eagles are going into this thing with momentum and with a healthy quarterback, I would feel the exact same way. But if that were the case, they'd be a 10.5-point favorite, not a 7.5-point favorite. What I can say for sure is that Jalen Hurts is not 100%. He is not going to be until next season. And so I can't sit here and say with 100% certainty that they're going to beat a team that was good enough to reach the Elite Eight. I am, however, going to pick the Eagles to win the game. My score is 27-17. My expectation is that the Eagles will be able to move the ball effectively against the Giants defense that I think by the second half of that game is going to be worn out. That is going to be clearly outclassed by the Eagles offensive line. Obviously, Lane Johnson is a big part of that, so we'll keep our fingers crossed there. On defense, my expectation is that the Eagles will be able to agitate Daniel Jones enough to disrupt any downfield passing game that they can do. And the Giants have fewer 20-yard plays than any team in the sport this season. They're not going to be able to create explosives in this game. And so it's going to have to be those long matriculated drives the way that you just described. I think they could do it 2 or 3 times. But in order for the Giants to win this football game, they're going to need 4 or 5 of those drives, and I'm just not going to bank on it. So to me, 7.5 is a good number. I probably would put it at 9.5 if I were the one making the line, because I think Jalen actually – but my worry about Jalen has a lot more to do with, I guess the accumulation of it throughout the postseason.
Okay.
I actually think he'll be pretty close to himself in this game. So Eagles 27-17 is my pick.
Eagles 27-17 advancing to the NFC Championship. I just was talking to Connor Thomas from the Fanatic. And he had mentioned the Eagles getting to the Super Bowl, but possibly losing. And losing a World Series and a Super Bowl on the same year would be tough. Guys, and Hembo, thank you so much for coming back on, my man. Guys, check him out on Twitter, @PaulHembo, if you don't already. Appreciate you. And go Birds.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
See you, buddy.
Let's go.
Peace.
All right, Scotty, that is going to wrap up this portion of the show. Guys, don't forget, if you don't already, check us out on Twitter @DSM_media. Hit that follow button. And while you're on the page, check out the link tree in our bio to take it every social media platform we are available on. Scotty and I will be back Saturday morning, getting you ready for the whole divisional round for the NFL playoffs, and then Eagles pregame live as well. For myself, for Scotty, for DSM Media, have a great rest of your night. What is going on, everybody? We're back here with Connor Thomas to get you ready for this Eagles-Giants divisional round matchup. Guys, if you don't already, make sure to check him out on Twitter @ConnorThomas975. My man, first off, I hope you're doing well. I know you were out of commission for a second, so it's good to have you back on and talk some Eagles playoffs with you. But A, how are you feeling? And then B, how are you feeling about this game as Saturday night quickly approaches? And what's your feeling on the vibe around the city right now? You talk to the passionate fan base every day at the station. So are they as confident as they should be right now in this Eagles matchup?
Yeah, man. First off, let me tell you, I didn't feel great. I was on the COVID IL for a couple days there. I still don't feel great. You saw that injury report that came out for the Birds, where it was like so many people. I would have been where Brandon Graham was. Day off, rest / illness. Man, I still don't feel great. But it's that time of year, and that's why I hate the winter. The only good thing about this time of the year is Eagles playoff football. That's the only good thing, and we've got a great one to look forward to Saturday night. The city's buzzing. Like, there's definitely a lot of buzz about this one, and it feels largely positive, which is weird. Okay. We don't get a lot of these, right, where you feel so strongly that the Eagles are going to win. Even in that 2017 year, it was the Nick Foles thing going on. So you're the 1 seed, but like you don't know if you're right. You don't know if you're going to beat the Falcons. Like, we thought you were going to win that one, but then who knows what's going to happen with Minnesota in the championship game, the Patriots in the Super Bowl. This year, you're just the bona fide favorite in this game. There should be no way you lose it. I think the fan base feels that. So it's a confidence as well as an excitement is what I'm hearing, and that's the way it should be.
See, I'm glad to hear that, though, because my first question or two are kind of based off of some negativity I've been seeing. And I guess social media is just a dark, distant place. It's a different world, right? So I'm glad to hear that the actual live callers are positive about this one, as they should be. When you head in 1 seed, getting healthy, open at 7.5-point favorites against the division rival that, you squeaked by last time against their backups, as Giants fans like to point out, but not recall the 48-22 shellacking when everybody was healthy a few weeks back. So I guess my first question to you, I'll get this one out of the way. Is this still the best matchup for you? Because I remember heading into the weekend, everyone was wondering, do you want the winner of Tampa Bay or Dallas? Some people picked the Giants to come away with the upset in Minnesota. Some people didn't. Is this the best possible matchup instead of playing the Cowboys this week?
Bro, I'll tell you already. I've had it laid out since before the playoffs started.
Okay.
It's the Giants, it's the 49ers, it's the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. That is the path. For the record, I nailed it back in 2017. I wanted Atlanta with the upset over Los Angeles. I wanted the Vikings in the championship game. I wanted Brady. So I nailed it back then. Hopefully it's same result on both.
Good juju.
So far, so good. But it's still the Giants. I mean, I don't want really, compared to the two teams playing on the other side of the NFC divisional round, I don't want that 49ers roster right now. And the Cowboys are just, they're too good. Like, not too good to play the Eagles, but they're too good to even put in the same conversation as the Giants. The Giants are a team that you should handle. You have already twice this year. I don't care who was playing for them in the final game of the regular season. You weren't doing anything, and you still took them out. Like, you should not lose to this team at home. This was the best matchup out of any of the teams. Honestly, this was probably the better matchup even than Seattle. I would have rather played the Giants than Seattle if they had pulled off the upset against San Francisco, which we know didn't happen. So, yes, Giants, best matchup. So far, everything in the playoffs is following the Eagles' way.
I guess I'm just sucked into this Twitter hole because I can't, like, what is this sentiment by whether it's reporters, whether it's Giants fans or Eagles, that the Giants are all of a sudden a hot team? They're all of a sudden a good team, or the other side of things where it's really hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. Yeah, if they're close in talent level, if one team wasn't a 13-win team and the others, like, I don't know. I get so not frustrated because it is social media, but it's mind-boggling to all of a sudden they're 3-5-1 in their last 9.
I'll tell you what it is. So here's what it is. Did you watch the Eagles play last weekend? No. We watched the Giants play last weekend. When was the last time you saw a healthy Jalen Hurts play? Chicago.
4 or 5 weeks ago.
It's been a while since we've seen this team play at the level they're going to be at on Saturday. And no, they're not going to come out and not be able to do the stuff they did when they were rolling in the middle of the season. Hurts is not listed on the injury report. That says he's healthy, or healthy enough to not be listed. I don't know if it's gamesmanship, but he's going to play. Lane Johnson's going to be back. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was back in full in the final game of the regular season. The only guy that might not be available is Avonte Maddox. And
he is now officially out.
Is he? Okay, I hadn't seen that yet. Who are the Giants coming at you with that wide receiver? Because it doesn't matter if you have Avonte Maddox or not. They're going to be fine. And I think it's just we haven't watched this team be as good as they were in the middle of the season for so long that we think all of a sudden, oh, what if that's just gone? It's not. They're better than the Giants.
Right. And it's normally a high positive to have the 1 seed and to not play in last weekend's wildcard weekend. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, we haven't seen them play. whatever. Let's get into the X's and O's of this one. I guess one way the Giants can possibly muck up this game is with their pass rush, their heavy blitz packages. If there is one slight, not weakness, but maybe negative that the Eagles offensive line has not handled perfectly this year, it is heavy blitz packages at times. How do you think Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen and company attack this Giants defense early? Are you coming out and you're running the ball, you're using Jalen in those RPO or read option situations to alleviate that pressure? Or do you think they're going to come out pass heavy and try to move the ball down the field quickly?
I hate to dance around the question, but it doesn't matter. So the Giants are 15th.
I love the answer.
They're 15th in the NFL defensively against the pass. They're 27th in the NFL defensively against the run. You could beat this team either way. So you could say, let them blitz, and we're just going to beat you because Jalen Hurts is that good at avoiding pressure. You could say we're going to pound it with Miles Sanders, and we're going to beat you because you cannot stop the run. They're mediocre to below average in basically every defensive metric. So, yeah, blitz all you want. I don't care how the Eagles attack it. They're better in whatever they choose to do. Now, the best option, if you're going to ask me to script it out, I'm getting the running game going early to kind of settle Hurts in a little bit more, because I do think he's going to be a little bit rusty when you ask him to step back into that RPO offense that requires him to run the ball more than he did against the Giants in Week 18. Sure. So, big Miles Sanders early. But I will tell you, too, the knee injury that bothered Miles Sanders and put him on the injury report ahead of the game in New Orleans, and he was also listed at points during the week ahead of the game against the Giants. It's not a just brush off, he's got a bruise on his knee. So it could be Boston Scott. It could be Kenneth Gainwell. I'll take my chances with anybody. The Giant killer. Yes.
It is odd, though, because I did see a picture of Miles at practice yesterday, I believe, with no knee brace on, and they were going through drills. So I don't know what the situation is there. Hopefully they're fully healthy in that capacity. I asked that question more so not out of a nervousness, but you do see tendencies from Nick and Shane where they love to come out and try to just Chicago. Jalen's injury is the perfect example. Force the ball down the field, and when it's not there, that can kind of allow a lesser talented team like the Giants to stay in the game. But I agree with you. I would come out and try to establish the run early and then just let Jalen, that's going to open up everything over the middle of the field with the Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. So, no, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. Are there any limitations in your mind? I know you already mentioned how he's not on the injury report, so whether that's gamesmanship or he is 100% healthy, do you think that there's any vanilla-ness, there's any plainness to the Hurts run game this week where they're not trying to put him in too many running situations?
My gut feeling is to say no. It's no holds barred, go all out, do whatever you got to do to win this game. But as I think about what I just said with establishing the run game early, using the backs, and the multiple ways you can beat this team, the playoffs and the divisional round, right? It seems like a weird place to say, hey, you could play these guys a little bit conservative and still win. But you could. So if you come out and you hang 21 on them in the first quarter and a half, you could see a pullback on what they're trying to do with Jalen Hurts in the running game. So over the course of the game, it could develop into one where when the game's all said and done, we look at the stat sheet and we say Jalen Hurts had 8 carries for 57 yards. And it's not what we normally see from him as far as production on the ground. But I would look at that more as a product of the game being heavily in the Eagles' favor. If this is a tight game where they need him to do everything on the ground, he's going to do it. They're going to go all out because you're not losing to the Giants at home in the divisional round. They're selling out for this one.
I agree with you. Again, moving on to the defensive side of the ball, we did just mention how Avonte Maddox is now officially out. He is the only Eagle listed as so. What would you do with, again, not that it matters playing these wide receivers, but what would you do with C.J. Gardner-Johnson? I'll say even moving forward, if they advance and Avonte Maddox cannot come back to play healthy, what are you doing with CGJ? Are you moving him to the slot? Are you and starting Reed Blankenship? Are you keeping him at safety and allowing Josiah Scott to start in the slot? What do you view as more important there for C.J. Gardner-Johnson?
It's a game-by-game basis. So I'm putting him in the slot here because a lot of what the Giants do is they attack zone coverage. And if you play soft like Jonathan Gannon does, a lot of the money they make is over the middle. You saw them do it against Minnesota with those short post routes, slants, quick cutting routes. And that's what Daniel Jones is really good at. You don't see him go deep, partially because he doesn't have the wide receivers to do it, but you don't see him take a lot of deep shots, which if you're playing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as safety and you're playing him back off the ball, 15 yards, makes it harder for him to have an impact. Now, in future weeks, like let's say you go get San Francisco and Brock Purdy, I'm putting him at safety because I think you're looking at a ball hawk guy that can make a bigger difference from the safety position.
Okay.
You don't need turnovers against the Giants. You just need to play solid defense. They'll beat themselves. So I'm playing him in the slot, Reed Blankenship at safety. And also I'm crossing my fingers that if you win this round, Avonte Maddox will be ready to go for the championship game.
Right. That is the hope. Obviously, they waited today to put him out. He did go and participate through walkthroughs all week. So that is one positive moving forward. You mentioned the scheme. I know Eagles fans are going crazy over Dan Orlovsky's breakdown of Minnesota's defense and comparing it to this Eagles soft zone. Any concern with JG this week and specifically his quote unquote soft zone at times against the Giants?
No, I'm pretty sure the Giants, last time I checked, were 27th in the NFL in passing offense. Sure, they were good against Minnesota. Tell you what, I don't know if you saw the comments about Minnesota's defensive coordinator after that game, but they're calling him everything from blind to much worse things that I'm not going to repeat. So you got to have a complete breakdown to let this team being the Giants, do well in the passing game against you. Even Jonathan Gannon's softest scheme is not going to be an issue because you're too talented for that. And frankly, I don't think the Giants are going to try and attack the Eagles through the air all that often. I think their game plan is going to be come in here and see if they could do what Washington did against you in your first loss of the year, which is give the ball to Saquon Barkley over and over and over again, long possessions, hold the ball, and try and keep you from gaining momentum and getting the home crowd out of it.
Glad you bring that up because my next question is, which is a bigger key defensively, eliminating Saquon or containing Danny Dimes in the pocket?
You know what? And for everything I just said, I think it's going to be keeping Daniel Jones in the pocket. The Birds are bad against mobile quarterbacks. They have been all year, and they've been really good against running backs since you bring in Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh and get Jordan Davis back. I really don't see any way that Saquon Barkley has a big day against this defense, but Daniel Jones can hurt you a little bit with the wheels, and extending plays outside of the pocket is how you make bad wide receivers look like really good ones, and good cornerbacks and good safeties look like really bad ones. So I know they're going to probably attack you more with Saquon on the ground because that's their bread and butter. That's their best player offensively. But still, you keep Daniel Jones in the pocket. You make him one-dimensional. And then you only have one guy you have to worry about stopping, and that's Saquon Barkley.
All right, man. So let's get down to predictions and X factors here. Give me an X factor on offense and defense this week for the Birds.
Okay, the X factor on offense is A.J. Brown. No doubt. He's your – I know Jalen Hurts should be the MVP this year. Unfortunately, he's not going to win it because of injury. But a lot of people, when you say best player on the Eagles offense, they say Jalen Hurts, no question. I'll tell you, honestly, it's A.J. Brown. Like, what he does is just next level to what I've seen any wide receiver ever on an Eagles team do. And that honestly includes what Terrell Owens did for this team in 2004, 2005.
I mean, the numbers have surpassed it.
So, and especially with Jalen Hurts' shoulder, we don't know how healthy he is. This might have to be one of those games. You get a 5-yard slant, you take it to the house. You get a 50-50 ball, you go take it away from somebody. A.J. Brown's got to be your best player on offense. Defensive side of the ball, your best player, you know what? I'm going to give it to the guy who's been their best player on defense this year. Hassan Reddick has got to be a monster because you're not going to blitz Daniel Jones a lot. We talked about keeping him in the pocket. The best way to do that is put him on his ass. And Hassan Reddick has done that better than any edge rusher in football this year. He's the guy that's got to be a difference maker for the defense on Saturday night.
No, man, I love both of your picks because essentially both are game wreckers and game changers on both sides of the ball for this Eagles team. And I know when you get into X factors and you get into stars of the game, people tend to, you want to give an outside of the box pick, an unpopular, opinion sometimes. When it might against the Giants team like this, just be that simple. Let the best players go out and dominate and take over this game. And I don't want to say end it early, but there's a possibility for another 48-22-esque type performance. So with
if we see Gardner Minshew, if we see Gardner Minshew in mop-up duty in the NFC divisional round against a divisional opponent like the Giants, you won't hear the end of it for weeks from me. I'll be going crazy. It'd be awesome.
No, man. Yeah, but then you'll turn on the television on Monday or turn on the radio on Monday, and you'll still hear how they're inferior to Brock Purdy and the Niners, or if the Cowboys beat by them.
You won't be hearing that from me on the Fanatic.
No, not a shot.
I'm feeling good about these guys.
Not a shot.
But anyway, you were saying.
To wrap it up, essentially, is Boston Scott going to find the end zone again?
My gut says no. My gut says no. You know what? It's fun because it's funny when he does the first couple times he did it against the Giants. We're like, oh, this guy's a monster. He had the 3 touchdown game out of nowhere. He had the world's slowest spin move a couple years ago against them, and it's like, okay, he just kills this team. The last 2 or 3 times it felt like, okay, we're late in the game. Let's get Boston Scott a couple touches on the goal line. That's not a playoff mentality.
Because, listen, he's gotten a lot better with it. I went from hating Nick Sirianni early on last year to he's a coach of the year candidate. He's one of the best across the league. My man does like his pandering a bit. Yes. And like you last week, like all my prop bet, Boston Scott anytime touchdown. I'm like, dude, it's not happening again. Last week, what do you know? We get down, or week 18, we get down to the end zone. It's not Miles Sanders. Normally from the 8, it's Kenny Gainwell early in the game. Nope, insert 35. Pound it to him twice for a tutty. Like Nick likes to get it done, dude. So I don't know.
So if you're going to do that, here's a nice little betting advice from me. Also bet the Eagles to cover the spread and maybe even bump those points up a little bit touchdown. Because the only way you're getting it is like a garbage time. Hey, we're up a bunch. Put in Boston Scott and just ice it by by showing it off.
Make a little bit of a mockery of it.
Exactly.
I agree with you. So listen, we talked a lot about the offense and defense of this game, and I think you and I are in agreement here that the Eagles should take care of business. I think they cover the spread. I think I know your thoughts. Do the Eagles come away with a win? And if so, what's their ceiling? We know what their ceiling is, but what do you view as this Eagles road to the Super Bowl continues? Can they get there? Will they win it, etc.?
Yeah, I think this is a win, no doubt. I have no concerns at all about what's going on with the New York Giants this weekend. 6 seeds versus 1 seeds all time. So 1990 is when they expanded the playoffs to 6 teams. They have 6 wins ever against 1 seeds. And divisional round 1 seeds in the divisional round are more likely. So 1 seeds in general, you're more likely to lose in the Super Bowl. Like 29% of the time, 1 seeds lose in the Super Bowl than you are to lose in the divisional round. You got a 50% chance to make the Super Bowl if you're a 1 seed. They're not losing this weekend, especially against a 6 seed. So yes, they win. As far as the rest of the way, next round matchup's going to be a tough one. I'd rather it be San Fran, but either way, that's going to be a dogfight. And then if you get out of there, you got 2 really tough teams that I see as the top teams in the AFC. And that's not even counting Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I see the top teams as Kansas City, obviously the 1 seed over there, and Buffalo, who's playing for so much with the emotional DeMar Hamlin situation and already being a really good team all year long. It's a tougher road than what the Philadelphia Eagles faced in 2017. And I got to tell you, I'm still a coin flip as to whether or not they can win it all. Do I think they will make it there? Yes. Do I think they'll win it? It's still too early for me to make that call, but they're talented enough too. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
A World Series loss and a potential Super Bowl loss. I don't know if the city can handle it. But I guess we'll be happy in the moment to get there, right, man? But
yeah, for sure.
Eagles take care of business this week over the New York Football Giants in the divisional round to advance to the NFC Championship. You heard it here first from Connor Thomas at Connor Thomas 975. Guys, give him a follow if you don't already. My man, outside of the Fanatic, tell the people where they can find all of your great content.
Oof, man. Okay. Let's see if I can run this down. So I'm hosting Locked On Phillies. You can find that on YouTube. You can find it on Twitter at LO_Phillies. Getting close to 1,000 subscribers on that. So I can start making a little extra money. Help your boy out. I got to pay rent for this nice apartment. You can hear me on the Fanatic. You can hear me weekends hosting Eagles post game on the Fanatic. Philly in 50. Find it on Instagram, TikTok. I'm on TikTok like these damn Gen Z kids. Got me doing all that. I'm not dancing. I'm just talking Philly sports. You can find that everywhere.
I heard he told me backstage if you get him to 1,000 subscribers and start making him money, he will start doing dances on TikTok.
I might do one. I might give you one. And also if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, I might give you one. I'll be popping some champagne, by the way, for every Eagles playoff victory, because we don't celebrate playoff wins enough in this town. We only get them every so often. So you can find me anywhere, all over socials, but Locked On, Philly and 50, and of course 97.5 Fanatic.
Guys, check out all of Connor's great content. Check him out on 97.5 The Fanatic. My man, appreciate it, and hopefully talk to you soon on the road to another Eagles Super Bowl victory. Have a great rest of your night.
This sounds good. You too, bud.
And Philadelphia has it.